Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for our national anthem, which is sponsored by Bayer and performed by Sarah Sheffield of the U.S. Marine Corps, the President's Own Band.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, Sandy Johnson, President and Chief Operating Officer of the National Press Foundation.
Welcome to the National Press Foundation's annual awards dinner. Tonight we celebrate the best in journalism. I'd like to Thank you. I'd like to introduce our head table, and then we'll let you enjoy your appetizers. Please hold your applause until the end. From your left, Rob Tayshoff, a philanthropist whose family established the Saul Tayshoff Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism. Brett Baer, Fox News Channel anchor and winner of the Tayshoff Award. Susan Swain, co-president of C-SPAN. Kevin Gallagher, cartoonist for the Baltimore Sun and The Economist, and winner of the Berryman Editorial Cartoonist Award. Sally Jenkins, Washington Post sports writer and winner of the Chairman's Citation. Kevin Goldberg, media attorney at Fletcher Heald and Hildreth, and chairman of the NPF Board of Directors. Kathy Guest, public affairs consultant and vice chair of the NPF Board of Directors. Nicole Carroll, editor of the Arizona Republic and now the editor-in-chief of USA Today, and winner of the Benjamin C. Bradley Editor of the Year Award. Knight Kiplinger, editor-in-chief at Kiplinger. Clarence Page, Chicago Tribune columnist and winner of the W.M. Kiplinger Distinguished Contributions to Journalism Award. Amos Sneed, founding partner at S3 Public Affairs and chairman of the NPF Dinner Committee. Tony Bartlemy, reporter for the Post and Courier of South Carolina and winner of the Technology and Journalism Award. And Sissy Baker, longtime broadcast executive whose family established the Everett McKinley Dirksen Award for Distinguished Reporting of Congress. So please enjoy your appetizer. The awards will begin in a few minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the podium, Sandy Johnson.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Your support of journalism and the First Amendment has never been more important. Let us remember, journalism is truth. Journalism is facts. Journalism matters. Those who seek to undermine the news media also undermine other pillars of our democracy: the presidency, the government, the judiciary. We should take heart from the many voices who have come to the defense of a free press, from senators like John McCain and Jeff Flake, to fired FBI Director James Comey, even the Pope, who described journalism as a mission. There is no better example of the importance of journalism than reporting by the Indianapolis Star that uncovered an Olympic physician It was the Indianapolis Star that uncovered an Olympic physician who molested hundreds of young girls. The prosecutor in that case said, "Thank God we have these journalists and that they expose this truth. We as a society need more investigative journalists." Now, more than ever, we must stand together, united in our support of a free press and the First Amendment. More than ever, these words ring true. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of press, the freedom of speech, or of the press. Your support tonight goes straight to the National Press Foundation's sole mission of training and educating journalists. In the past year, NPF has trained hundreds of journalists through webinars, video tutorials, issues briefings, and 4-day immersion workshops. We produce digital content that has been accessed 200,000 times across the world. More than ever, journalism matters. This video illustrates NPF's work.
Journalism. Never more essential, never more challenging. In the past year, the National Press Foundation trained thousands of journalists in person and online. Our signature 4-day training programs gave journalists an immersion into the policies and politics of food and agriculture, understanding what's at stake on environmental issues, the critical role of public health, and reporting on the many facets of aging and retirement.
I'll be able to bring back a whole new slew of sources, knowledge, and insight that I know that will produce in-depth stories and articles for our local readers there in Salinas Valley.
I really feel like I'm walking away from this looking at the concept of aging in ways that I hadn't before, and there's so many different angles and so many different stories to be told.
Access to some of these top flight speakers has been one of the most rewarding parts. Dr. Tony Fauci, Dr. Bill Dietz, these are giants in their field.
I think the biggest thing that this fellowship gave me was access, whether that was in terms of the experts that we got to hear from. I thought they were really accessible, letting a bunch of journalists grill them afterwards.
I'm walking away from this with a Rolodex of sources, some of whom I've already talked to, but I'd never met in person.
They really provided me with a roadmap to pursuing stories once you get back to the office and can start planning next steps for my beat.
We really had the opportunity to compare and contrast information from different sources, and that'll really help me think critically about these topics as I look to bring some new stories to our readers in Nebraska.
It's such a great opportunity to step back and climb up the mountain a little bit and look down from a higher perspective to see some of the larger trends that are driving health and health in the community.
NPF kept journalists on top of the changing dynamics of our country with training on cybersecurity and encryption, hate crimes and tracking police violence, ways to effectively use the Freedom of Information Act, and what to do if you're arrested or assaulted while doing your job. We trained journalists on the forward-looking issues like autonomous vehicles and the future of manufacturing, and on toolbox practices like how to use C-SPAN video in your reporting and how to look like a pro on TV. Your support helps the National Press Foundation make good journalists better.
Now I'd like you to meet NPF's hardworking staff: Chris Adams, Director of Training and Content, Program Manager Jesse Schneider, Digital Manager Tyler Mertens, Mattingly Fellow Colin Stoker, and Jenny Ashmacher, Director of Operations.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Goldberg of Fletcher Heald Hildreth and Chair of the National Press Foundation Board of Directors.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to start the night off with the chairman's citation. My love affair with journalism began with the sports section of the Washington Post. As I grew older, I realized that sports are more than just games. They also serve as a representation of our communities and a reflection of society at its best and its worst. With all apologies to Charles Barkley, athletes are role models, and the institutions are equal to the richest and most powerful corporations and governments on earth. So when it came time to make my selection for the 2017 Chairman's Citation, an award recognizing accomplishments outside the traditional categories of excellence, I knew I wanted to honor a sports columnist who holds those in power accountable. And I knew I wanted it to be Sally Jenkins of the Washington Post. She takes on institutions like the NCAA, the NFL, and the International Olympic Committee in a carefully crafted and conveyed way. Her nuanced take on controversial topics and people resonates with readers as she presents subjects for the people they are, rather than mere characters of who we have generally perceived them to be. 25 years at the Post as a columnist and feature writer, author of 12 books including 4 New York Times bestsellers. In 2005, she was the first woman inducted in the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Hall of Fame. And I'm very proud to say that tonight she becomes the first female winner of the NPF's Chairman's Citation. The career speaks for itself, but her words speak louder. Listen to this first paragraph from her January 25th column on the USA Gymnastics scandal. A national organization with the initials USA on it forced young girls to submit to pelvic exams by a child molester. Literally hundreds of them were isolated in mandatory camps and were repeatedly assaulted by a barehanded pedophile for years on end, while nobody cared to notice that no decent doctor would perform such an exam on young girls, much less ungloved. Where in the fresh red hell is an independent investigation into USA Gymnastics? And why isn't Congress threatening to smash the US Olympic Committee's charter into pieces with a gavel over this? That's masterclass writing from a master writer, Sally Jenkins.
Thank you. I really said that? Yikes. I'm very self-conscious accepting a citation for what is essentially a reflex, which is what journalism really is. It's an involuntary habit of mind that requires you to satisfy your curiosity the way a Labrador goes after a bone in the dirt. It's a very scratchy, obsessive profession. Sports journalism is especially involuntary. It's addictive. It's an addictive calling that requires you to work most Saturdays and Sundays and Christmases and New Year's and a lot of nights. And that means going against the traffic of life. But it also means that you get to sit in a stadium for free and watch ordinary mortals do the most immortal things. And you try to describe that for all the folks who couldn't be there. I'm extremely grateful to have such a job, one that allows me to wear sneakers to work, and to get paid for that has always seemed like a bit of a bonus. For that, I would like to thank the kind editors and publishers of the Washington Post, most particularly my sports editors Matt Vita and Matt Rennie, who are here tonight, who have not only granted me occasional raises, but more importantly, have rewarded the instinct to go against traffic. Sometimes people don't like to hear the final score, and especially Notre Damers and Alabamans. They especially don't like to hear it from a woman. But all journalists are in the business of reporting the final score, whether it makes the audience happy or not. And as an opinion columnist, it also becomes your job to explain that final score in ways that may not have occurred to people, and to suggest sometimes how to feel about that final score. And this means that you're often doubly unpopular, and sometimes quite alone on an issue. But in fact, sometimes being alone on an issue in sports, which can command such mob fanaticism, is just the sure sign that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Sports are an especially tricky subject matter because they're essentially the stories we tell ourselves about who we would like to be, but aren't. Champions are deeply flawed people. They're insane, they're neurotic, they frequently fail. They are not the perfect representations of virtue that we would like them to be, and this is where the trouble starts. And this is right where a good sports writer goes and has to start digging. People tend to want very reassuring answers from sports. They want clear-cut answers. But there is a real danger in writing about them simplistically just to please the audience, because you run into the danger of dividing the world into winners and losers, heroes and sinners, and do-gooders and do-badders, as the great Molly Ivins would have called them. I hope that there's a whisper in my work that says it's all a lot more complicated than that. Too often we like and dislike people and celebrate or strip people of celebration for all the wrong reasons. It's incredibly tempting to use your journalistic power to provoke likes and dislikes. The great film critic Kenneth Tynan was lucky enough to study under C.S. Lewis, and Lewis gave Tynan a piece of advice that I believe is the best piece of advice any journalist or writer has ever received. Keep a strict eye on your adjectives, Lewis told him. They should not just praise and blame, but diagnose and distinguish. I appreciate this citation because it suggests that I've tried to do that. And so thank you very much. Thank you to the foundation, and thank you to my editors, Matt and Matt, the Matts, who keep such a sharp eye on my adjectives. Thank you very much.
And now it's time for our Bradley Editor of the Year Award. There have now been 2 Oscar-nominated films in which iconic actors have played Ben Bradley, the legendary Washington Post editor for whom this next award is named. First, there was Jason Robards in All the President's Men, and this past year, Tom Hanks in The Post. It's not premature to start guessing at what actress might one day play Nicole Carroll, because her past year makes for one compelling drama of its own. When death threats arose after the Arizona Republic's editorial board endorsed a Democrat for president, Carroll went into a Trump rally to brave the harassment hurled at her staff and came out with an idea for a story about a border wall. Just the latest example of ambition, innovation, and leadership that led our judging panel to say Nicole Carroll embodies the spirit and courage that define the legendary Benjamin C. Bradley. You'll learn more from a short video, and then we'll hear from our Bradley Editor of the Year and the newly appointed Editor-in-Chief of USA Today. It's been a big month, Nicole Carroll.
He's undaunted.
She always pushed for innovation and said, figure out a way to make that work.
She never backed off.
She had empowered me.
She brings a kind of authority to what she does.
She makes it feel that you're a part of something big.
And it was clear from day one, she loves the news.
I've been in this newsroom since I was 19 years old, and I remember the first time seeing her when I was an intern, and you know, she didn't treat me like one.
We live in a time where resources have become tighter and tighter in journalism. The inclination would be to cut back on your ambition. Nicole has never lowered her ambitions.
She would move mountains to get it done. And it wasn't just because it was her job. It was because she believed in the work we did.
When you think about this newsroom and what we have been doing to get to where we are today, it's really impressive. Gabby Giffords, our Congresswoman, was shot in the head in an assassination attempt. We had 19 firefighters die tragically in a wildfire. We did the story that started the national VA scandal. We had a flood of children from Central America come through Arizona. We kept thinking bigger, and that was all because of Nicole.
From building a studio, to drones, to 360 video, to simulcasting, she's always been a champion of letting us run with those ideas.
So now you have the presidential campaign, and the newspaper writes an endorsement that gets us death threats. And that's when Nicole had an even bigger idea.
I was among the many reporters who went to the political rallies during the presidential race. I heard the chants of "Build the Wall."
Her idea is that we would cover every mile, every foot, every inch of the border.
And that seemed huge in itself.
That I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's going to be an amazing project.
The award is in the name of Ben Bradley, one of the greatest editors in American history. And so to win the award, as I did some years ago, feels like a really special honor.
I had the honor to meet and work just a bit with Ben Bradley. And when I learned that Nicole won the Ben Bradley Award, it occurred to me that he could not be prouder.
It's been 18 years now, and now she's the top editor and still my editor. And she still loves the news. She still gets super excited. She's still moving mountains, and they're bigger mountains now. And she still believes.
You guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much to the National Press Foundation for this honor. I am truly humbled and grateful. This award truly belongs to the journalist at the Arizona Republic and is shared with my colleagues across the USA Today Network and Gannett. And I'd like to thank my husband, Brad, and children, Caitlin, Sydney, and Finn. In fact, I'd like to thank all the family members here tonight. Your support allows us to pursue this profession, and you share in these honors. When journalists get together like this, we often talk about what we don't know. We don't know the next tragedy we'll be called to cover. We don't know what the next Facebook change will do to us. And we have no idea what the president will tweet tomorrow. But there are some things we know very well, and that's how to tell stories and how to get to the truth. My first story is about a church in Arizona. One of our editors went there to interview a priest whose fellow priest had been murdered. The public defender's office subpoenaed his off-the-record notes. A court ruled we had to turn them over. Of course we refused. We had to protect our source and our ability to uncover the truth. I talked with the editor about how this could play out. He simply shrugged and said, "I'll go to jail if I have to." We fought and we won. The second story is about a reporter's car. Now, there's a car down the street from here that belonged to an Arizona Republic reporter, but that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about a reporter in Phoenix right now. He revealed that a developer accused of defrauding cities of millions was actually a mobster who'd been placed in the witness protection program. I asked that reporter, was he worried about outing a gangster, revealing the truth? He told me no, but every morning I start my car by myself before I let my kids get in, just in case. The third story is about a hospital in Mexico. After hearing the chance to build the wall, we sent teams out to report the truth of the wall. We knew there would be risks and we planned for their safety. But we didn't anticipate the scorpion sting in the outback that would leave one reporter partly paralyzed overnight. We didn't know the heat would take down a photographer on the side of a road on a rural Mexican highway, where her colleagues ditched their assignment and took her to a tiny hospital in a foreign country in the middle of the night. When I think about the legacy of the great Ben Bradley, I think about these stories. Because for all the unknowns in this business, I know this. Our purpose has never been more clear, to fight for the truth. You see it in Asbury Park, where a newsroom exposed greedy landlords who left their tenants in squalor. You see it in Milwaukee, where they traced blackouts, injuries, and even death to tainted alcohol at Mexican resorts. And in Indianapolis, where our colleagues brought down a monster and gave voice to an army of survivors. In cities and towns across the USA, journalists fight for our First Amendment rights, even when faced with powerful opposition. We take down the liars and the bullies, even though they may retaliate. And we send our staffs into the field cautiously, even when it's dangerous. Because we know what Ben Bradley said. The truth is never as dangerous as a lie in the long run. The most dangerous thing we could do now is back down. I know that we're here for the long run, and we will keep telling the truth, and we will keep telling the truth, and we will keep telling the truth. Thank you.
The Innovative Storytelling Award recognizes digital journalism of the highest quality that reinvents the way stories are told to present a compelling audience experience. There were a number of stories about border walls in the past year, but few better than Raising Barriers from the Washington Post, which looked at 63 border walls or fences that separate neighboring countries on 4 continents. This ambitious project was the work of Samuel Granados, Zoanne Murphy, Kevin Shaw, and Anthony Faiola. Our judges described the graphic and video elements as seamless in the way they worked beautifully together. The project exemplifies technology in the service of extraordinary storytelling. You'll see for yourself in a short video, after which we'll hear from Zoanne Murphy on behalf of her colleagues.
In my opinion, fences mean fear. The Israeli government didn't want to do a fence, and she was forced.
I am not free in the land of the free. I am not free to move in my land.
A generation ago, globalization shrank the world. Nations linked by trade and technology began to erase old boundaries. But now, barriers are rising again, driven by waves of migration, spillover from wars, and the growing threat of terrorism. To explore this global trend, the Washington Post sent a small team to 8 countries across 3 continents, resulting in a powerful online interactive, Raising Barriers. To tell this story, the Post built a completely new platform, allowing viewers to scroll at their own pace through videos, text, and graphics. The innovative technology seamlessly weaves together the 3 mediums, providing context and analysis. It also immerses audiences in personal, often emotional stories of those living with border walls.
هلا عن جد انه كل واحد يجي يقول لا انا مهرب وما بعرف شو انه حتى احيانا نفكر احيانا قبل هالمره نكون معهم صريحين فكرنا نمشي 15 يوم بين الجبال لنوصل على النمسا.
Raising Barriers was published in 2016 and remains relevant now more than ever as border walls continue to be built.
Ladies and gentlemen, Zoanne Murphy, Kevin Shaw, and Anthony Faiola of the Washington Post.
It's such an honor to stand here in front of so many inspiring journalists, alongside my incredible colleagues, Anthony Faiola and Kevin Shaw. The idea for Raising Barriers began as the presidential election was heating up. A call for a wall on our southern border was becoming increasingly important in the election. A remarkable leader at the Post, Kat Downs, who at that time was director of graphics, and her deputy, Sam Granados, pitched an ambitious multimedia approach to exploring how the border wall debate fit into the larger global context. Working with Micah Gelman, director of video, and our foreign editor, Doug Gell, they put together a team of journalists who each specialized in a different medium: film, design, coding, and writing. This collaboration between technologies and newsroom desks, which was established at the very beginning of the project, allowed for a dynamic, creative process. Each team member played a vital role. While I filmed, Anthony Faiola, with his beautiful writing and expertise on globalization, brought crucial context and analysis. I met Tony on the Greek-Macedonian border in the makeshift Idomeni refugee camp. We were filming a group of children who had made their own video cameras out of cardboard. These kids were so used to being filmed that they pretended to be journalists themselves. That moment with those kids drove home that our responsibility was not just to cover this, because it was clearly being well covered, but to give our audiences a deeper understanding. Raising Barriers brought us to walls, razor wire fences, and militarized zones around the world, where we heard unforgettable stories of horror, heroism, survival, fear, and hope. We talked to people living on both sides of the walls and many sides of the issues. We interviewed refugees and migrants fleeing for their lives and those worried about the dangers of uncontrolled migration. It was Kevin Shaw and Sam Granados who tied all these stories together in an elegant online presentation. They built an interactive that brought out the best in each storytelling approach, allowing video, maps, graphics, and text to flow together in a powerful way. For me, filming this project was one of those experiences where you're doing exactly what you're meant to do. The scenes we witnessed were so intense that I filmed nonstop, so I'm very grateful for senior producer Rima Kad's brilliant editing on the project. Collaboration like this is one of the most fulfilling things about working at the Washington Post. I'm proud that we had the support of our executive editor, Marty Barron, as well as managing editors Emilio Garcia Ruiz, Cameron Barr, and Tracy Grant, leaders who clearly see the vision for this kind of deep dive journalism and then create the space and time to make it possible. Thank you so much for everyone who watched Raising Barriers, and thank you to the National Press Foundation for this wonderful award.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium Sissy Baker.
Thank you very much. I left journalism 5 years ago after 35 years in the industry, and I went back to school and became a substance abuse counselor. And the number of stories that I have that I can no longer tell is just incredible. And I charge all of you to help with this terrible epidemic of opioid crisis, heroin, cocaine, alcohol. It's a rewarding profession, and I'm glad I'm there, but I do miss journalism. It is a privilege and an honor to give this award, named after my grandfather, Everett Dirksen, celebrating distinguished reporting of Congress. It is the only award in Washington that is given strictly for reporting of Congress. My grandfather was a fierce defender of our freedom and independence. And before I announce the winners, which you already know, it's important to never forget who Everett Dirksen is. He was a giant in the Senate. And it's important to remember what he looked like and how he sounded with his extraordinary voice, which earned him 2 Grammy Awards for records that he cut with his voice. So here's a clip of my grandfather Dirksen in his own words describing his definition of freedom.
Freedom is a moral climate in which man does not fear his government or its agents, knowing that a free government has come to power through the suffrage of the people themselves, and that the administrators of a free government are not his masters, but they are his servants and accountable to him. That, in my judgment, is freedom.
So now you know he's not just a marble building up on Capitol Hill. This year, the Dirksen Award for Distinguished Reporting of Congress goes to Wall Street Journal reporters James Grimaldi and Michelle Hackman. Their investigative reporting exposed Representative Tom Price, who at the time was the nominee to be Secretary of HHS. They reported Tom Price for profiting off of his own legislation in Congress. The story goes that Price had traded in his personal health stocks while pushing legislation that could pump up the value of those stocks. As a result of their reporting, Price had to resign his short-lived post as cabinet secretary. Here now are the fabulous reporters, James Grimaldi and Michelle Hackman, to receive the Dirksen Award and a $5,000 prize, well earned.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sissy Baker. And I'd like to thank my wife, Nikki Collins, for all the love and support and putting up with nonsense over the years. It's tough being married to an investigative journalist, and I'm lucky to be married to someone so understanding. And thanks to my son Xavier, who keeps me humble I've offered to find him an award-winning journalist to edit his history papers, but sadly he declines. By the way, I think I found the poem that you're trying to memorize here. Here's the card. He's here tonight. Thank you for coming. And to Michelle, one of the smartest and most resourceful and hardworking journalists anyone could ever have as a partner.
Thanks. I just want to quickly say thank you to our editors who could not be here tonight, who were fabulous collaborators. My parents, who are also not here, who didn't discourage me too hard from becoming a journalist. My roommate, who is here tonight, who had to put up with my journalism antics since freshman year of college. And I wanted to thank James, too, because I once had a professor who said to us the mark of a truly talented journalist is one who is generous with his time and mentorship, and that's really what I found in James, both in this Tom Price reporting and since then.
Oh, thank you very much. So I have a few other comments. I wanted to say it's become a cliche to say we're in a historical moment or that this is a moment in history that requires a different stance. And I think that kind of thinking misses the point. I believe that investigative reporting is always required, that journalists always need to be vigilant for corruption and conflicts of interest, and that's not new. It applied in the last administration, it applies in this administration, and it will apply to the next one. As Sissy Baker can remind me, and her legacy with her political heritage, there are two parties in this town, and they both deserve scrutiny. It's needed in this Congress and the next, and to whomever holds power. It applies to those members of Congress, such as Dr. Tom Price, who are tapped for administration jobs. And it's the sort of thing that we should be doing constantly. It should expose the kind of waste, fraud, and graft that crop up in any government. I often tell people that I specialize in political investigative reporting, which gives me kind of a job security, right? But more than that, holding the powerful accountable is crucial to the survival of our democracy, no matter who's in power. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium Amos Sneed, Chairman of the National Press Foundation Dinner Committee.
Hey, thank you. My name is Amos Sneed. I want to say thank you to everyone for joining this famous Washington, D.C. dinner. And there are a few people I would like to thank. This is our dinner committee. So these have been the people who have been calling all of you, and thank you all for returning their calls. So please hold your applause till the end. Allison Schwatik with S3 Public Affairs, Marie Coco with Blue Cross Blue Shield, Lauren Culbertson with Twitter, Tara DiGiulio with GE, Kathy Guest, Kevin Goldberg with Fletcher, Hild, and Hildreth, better? All right. Amani Green with Green Group, Matt Haller with the International Franchise Association, Raymond Cairns with Bayer, Rob Kukro with E&E Publishing, Tara Malarchek with Mazda, Lauren Protapas with CNN, Liz Sidoti with BP, Jeffrey Smith with Honda, Rob Stoddard, NCTA, Sally Squires with Powell Tate, Susan Swain with C-SPAN, Chris Thorne with 3 Advertising, and John Walcott with Thomson Reuters. Please join me in thanking them for their work.
Good evening. The National Press Foundation is celebrating this year the 30th anniversary of our Paul Miller Washington Reporting Fellowship, which has trained 563 journalists through the years. We have 100 graduates of that program here tonight. Young reporters chosen for this prestigious program meet one day a month from September to June. They visit the Pentagon, the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and other Washington institutions, where they receive an intensive and lively overview from policymakers, top experts, and veteran beat reporters. This video describes the program.
30 years ago, the Paul Miller Washington Reporting Fellowships were created in honor of a Gannett News executive. In the years since, 563 reporters have been awarded fellowships to learn how to report from the nation's capital. Today, Paul Miller alumni fill leadership positions across journalism and communications. Paul Millers have won Pulitzers, Peabodys, and NPF Awards. The skills they learned in their Paul Miller Fellowship helped propel them into the top ranks of journalism. They are bureau chiefs, newsroom editors, journalism professors, White House correspondents, investigative reporters, and more. Paul Miller training helped make all of them darn good at their jobs.
Paul Miller Fellowship took me to every agency in Washington, including agencies that I didn't even know existed, and it gave me an in.
Paul Miller Fellowship was really essential toward building my career, as well as my awareness of Washington, its resources, and the other journalists covering Washington.
You know, whenever I come back from a Paul Miller day, they're always like, what'd you learn today? What'd you do today?
Without it, I'd probably still be lost in the basement of the Capitol in some way.
At the end of the day, everybody's trying to learn and trying to be a better reporter.
What stands out to me really is what a variety of things we learned and how your brain was just melting by the end of the day.
I was traveling to Cuba to cover Jimmy Carter's first trip. One of the Paul Miller visits, we had visited a guy who had said, you know, if you ever need an intelligence briefing. And before I left for Cuba, I got an intelligence briefing from some folks at one of those three-letter agencies that shall remain nameless.
It makes a big difference to be able to walk into the House Speaker's lobby and know 3 other people in the room.
Where you should stand in the Capitol if you want to talk to a senator as they're coming out.
Playing tourist a little bit with it too, being able to see those places that other journalists get to see, but if you don't cover that for your beat, you don't get to see that on a daily basis.
It has really opened doors, made crucial introductions, and given all of us an all-access pass.
Once a Paul Miller, always a Paul Miller.
Will all the Paul Millers in the room please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Now, on to more awards. NPF's Fedi Reporting Award recognizes outstanding journalism focused on the impact of federal laws and regulations on local communities. This year, the award goes to the Washington Post for a moving and deeply reported series on lapses in the federal refugee resettlement program. It shows how MS-13 gangs were rebuilding in the United States with young people who crossed alone into this country from El Salvador and elsewhere in Central America. In the Washington area alone, more than 40 of these unaccompanied minors have been involved in MS-13 violence, including murder. Congratulations to Michael Miller, Justin Juvenal, and Dan Morse.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Justin Juvenal, Michael Miller, and Dan Morse of the Washington Post.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this award. We are really honored to be recognized by the National Press Foundation for our examination of MS-13. My Post colleagues Justin Juvenal and Dan Morse have covered the gang for years. I joined forces with them 1 year ago today when police in Fairfax County, Virginia arrested 10 people for the brutal murder of a teenage girl. Together, we set out to explore the resurgence of MS-13 in the Washington region. Damaris Reyes Rivas had come to America to escape gang violence in El Salvador, but instead of safety in the Washington suburbs, she found death. On a cold winter day in the woods outside Springfield, members of MS-13 filmed on their cell phones as they tortured and stabbed Damaris. She was 15 years old. Her killers weren't much older. Of the 10 arrested, all but 1 were teenagers. 6 were juveniles. Most of them had come here as unaccompanied minors, part of a wave of roughly 200,000 mostly Central American youths detained at the U.S.-Mexico border without their parents and later reunited with relatives in America through a federal refugee resettlement program. For Justin, Dan, and me, Damaris's killing and others like it raised questions about this federal program, which had placed nearly 20,000 unaccompanied minors in the Washington area alone since 2014. Who were these kids? What was the program doing to vet them or protect them? And how did some end up in MS-13 while others ended up as their victims? As we pursued answers, police continued to unearth bodies in public parks, and the Trump administration launched a much publicized crackdown on the gang, labeling MS-13 as public enemy number 1. We tried to steer clear of politics to focus on the situation on the ground. We interviewed scores of sources, from relatives of victims to the suspects themselves, often in Spanish. And what became clear was that the gang was indeed on the rise. Dozens of unaccompanied minors in the DC suburbs have been pulled into its orbit. At least 30 killings in the Washington area in the past 2 years have been linked to the gang. And it is immigrant communities that are living with the reality of this resurgence. The work we did wouldn't have been possible without our excellent researcher, Jennifer Jenkins, and our editors, Linda Robinson, Mary Pat Flaherty, and Maria Glad, whose coverage of MS-13 more than a decade ago showed us how it should be done. We are also especially grateful for the support of the Post's top editors, particularly Mike Semmel, Cameron Barr, and Marty Barron. Thank you.
Our next award for technology in journalism recognizes organizations or individuals that develop, adapt, or creatively apply technology to produce high-quality journalism. This year's award goes to Tony Bartlemy of the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina. He borrowed a $90,000 camera that used infrared technology to dramatically illustrate the greenhouse gas footprint in the community. NPF's judges called it great journalism, supported by a novel technology tool, noting that the series showed that carbon emissions are everywhere, from leaf blowers to smokestacks. This video explains more about the project.
So we were in the thick of an in-depth project about climate change. And these stories had the loose theme of important climate issues that are hiding in plain sight. Stories like, massive changes in the ocean plankton, the stuff that produces half of the oxygen on Earth or every other breath. Stories like the impact of sea rise on communities and the decimation of the world's coral reefs. Something kept bugging me as we were doing these stories. These are problems that are affecting every single one of us on Earth, but where's the sense of urgency? So I thought, well, what if we could see the problem? What if we could see carbon dioxide? So I heard about a camera. It's made by a defense contractor called FLIR Systems. I called them up and said, hey, can I borrow the camera? And they said, sure, but it's the only camera of its kind in the United States, and by the way, it costs 90 grand, don't break it. So we got the camera, and the hunt was on. As far as we knew, we were the only news organization to ever ask to borrow it. So as we were playing with the camera, shooting things around town, something dawned on me. Humanity has done a wonderful job of cloaking its combustion. When we drive, that car is a fire. When we turn on a light switch, that's a fire at a power plant miles away. We are literally surrounded by invisible fires. But thanks to a little creative use of technology, we were able to make the invisible visible to our readers.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. What an honor. So when I do an investigative project, there's a three-letter word I shoot for, and that word is aha. Great word. I actually like to think of it as two words sort of smushed into one. You've got the relief of finally understanding something complex, and then the second word, the ha, like it's so clear now. I should have known in the first place. You know, aha moments are beautiful. They are moments of clarity. They are moments of awakening. They are the gifts we give our viewers and our readers and ourselves. I had a lot of aha moments doing Chasing Carbon. As I mentioned on the video, I suddenly realized how we're surrounded by invisible fires and how these fires add up. Every second, human beings and their machines generate heat equivalent to 4 Hiroshima bombs every second. And as I went around with that CO2 camera, went around the city, it suddenly seemed so clear that if we want to do something real about climate change, we have to put out some of these hidden fires. So I'm lucky. I work for a newspaper that's owned by people who live mainly in Charleston, South Carolina. They're invested. They know that we need to give people more, not less. They know. They gave me the time to learn about plankton. Yes, plankton. Months that we did some research on that, and they know it takes time and money to create these stories that help readers see things in a different light, create those clarifying moments that lead to real change. So I'm happy to report that this trust, this investment in investigative journalism pays off in South Carolina. Chasing Carbon and our other climate change stories reshape the debate about how a place that's barely above sea level will deal with rising seas. You know, before the city really had its head in the sand. Now they're talking about pumps and seawalls and raising houses, taking action. So I am really grateful about for the passport that journalism gives me to do this work. And I'm so grateful for the National Press Foundation and its judges for recognizing how the creative use of technology can create those ahas, those moments, those wonderful moments of awakening to something that we know in our hearts and in our lungs is true. So thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Knight Kiplinger, Editor-in-Chief at Kiplinger.
Let me tell you about Clarence Page. When Clarence Page was graduating from high school in Middletown, Ohio, he asked the advisor to his school newspaper to sign his yearbook. Across the top of the newsroom staff photo, she wrote this: "Remember me when you win your Pulitzer." The year was 1965, and 24 years later, Clarence Page did win his Pulitzer. And he did indeed remember that teacher, Mrs. Mary Kendall, with enormous gratitude for encouraging him to become a journalist. They're still in touch. Mrs. Kendall still lives in Middletown, Ohio, where in December she turned 101. I asked Clarence the other day when and why he decided to become a reporter. He said it was in his junior year of high school, in the tumultuous year of 1963. And we think 2017 was a bad year in America. 1963 has been described as the year everything happened, and it wasn't good. In June, civil rights activist Medgar Evers was murdered. In August, hundreds of thousands of Americans, black and white, marched on Washington to demand open accommodations for people of all races. In September, America was sickened by the murder of 4 Sunday school students in the bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama. And in November, we lost our president to an assassin's bullet in Denver, the year 1963. Well, Clarence was a junior in high school, and he decided to become a journalist to help people make sense of events like this, events swirling around them, whether in their local city, the nation, or the world. His parents were not keen on their only child majoring in journalism in college. His father, who worked in a factory, and his mother, a cook who did catering and occasionally ran restaurants, had higher aspirations for Clarence than journalism. They wanted him to pursue a respected, substantial, remunerative career, ideally medicine, but certainly not journalism. I might as well have told them, he remembers today, that I wanted to be a poet. At his graduation from Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, his mother asked him on graduation day, only half in jest, "Clarence, can you still go to medical school with a degree in journalism?" Short answer, Mom, no. But his grandmother, an English teacher, encouraged him to follow his dream and become a reporter and a writer. Change is happening, she said, and you do what you want to do. And so he did. And so he has done for nearly 50 years, toiling in the vineyards of our profession as a newspaper and television reporter, a writer of editorials and columns, achieving distinction in everything he has undertaken. Clarence told me recently, "I am grateful for the opportunities journalism has given him to appreciate the diversity of this world, to travel, to get to know people of different backgrounds, different temperaments, different outlooks, to help people navigate change." Clarence Page is a proud son of the state of Ohio, as was the journalist after whom this award is named, my grandfather, W.M. Kiplinger. For many years, our family has supported a program for mid-career journalists centered at Ohio State University in Columbus, from which my grandfather graduated in 1912. Now a plan is afoot to move the Kiplinger Fellowship Program from Columbus, from Ohio State, to Ohio University in Athens, which is Clarence Page's alma mater. Now, this is all an uncanny coincidence, but what the heck, let's embrace it. I'm pleased that numerous senior leaders of OU and its very distinguished E.W. Scripps School of Journalism are with us tonight, led by University President Dwayne Nellis, as is the director of the Kiplinger Program for Mid-Career Journalists, Kevin Smith. They're all here to salute our honoree, one of Ohio University's most distinguished alumni. And now please welcome that distinguished journalist and alumnus of Ohio University, the winner of this year's W.M. Kiplinger Award for Distinguished Contributions to Journalism, Clarence Page. Now you can put that right there.
Over here? Okay, great. Fill that up with lottery tickets, would you? Thank you. Thank you. Knight, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I just think about if my father were here tonight, he'd be saying, "Well, you're walking in some tall cotton now, son. Tall cotton. We've had some magnificent award winners tonight. Another round of applause for all of them. I tell you, the heart and soul of our business is the reporters, when they go out there and gather the information. The photographers go out there and get the images. Those who bring the world to us and bring us to the world. I'm just a scrivener, one of those opinion writers, as my late great colleague Murray Kempton used to say, the opinion writer is like a soldier who comes down from the hills after the battle is over and shoots the wounded. Needless to say, we have plenty of targets of opportunity these days, to say the least. And this is what is important, ladies and gentlemen, because the journalist is getting, I think we're at a period now, as you've heard tonight, where you have to appreciate how, I had a friend of mine said, I dare you to get through your entire speech without saying, now more than ever. This is what people are saying these days, because there is an importance to media today more than ever. We can all joke about and talk about the abuse that journalists take or dish out, but there's definitely a seriousness to things these days. Yes, Sandy, I'm going to throw my speech away and just speak from the heart just for a moment. I woke up this morning and I heard that Jacob Zuma had been voted out of South Africa's presidency by his political party, the ANC. Some of you are applauding because you know what the ANC is. If you don't know the ANC, do you know Nelson Mandela? You know that name. My first overseas assignment was to South Africa in the summer of 1976 when the Soweto riots broke out for my convenience. Because I'd been hassling our managing editor about how come we don't have anybody covering South Africa. Next day, the managing editor wants to speak to you. Next week, I'm on my way to Joburg. My first overseas assignment. But history was happening. I didn't even know it, but history was happening. I was there. I was able to see my piece of it. Like James Baldwin said, it's what we all want to do is to bear witness. And that, to me, is what has been the best part of my career. At that time, the question everybody's minds was, are we going to have a bloodbath? Is it going to be a revolution? Is everything going to turn upside down? It is to the great credit of Nelson Mandela as a man of peace, a man of the law, a man of justice, and immense, unthinkable patience. All the years he spent in prison and came out without any visible resentment about it all. It all had a purpose to it. And what's important in covering Africa, I found, was that everybody wants to see democracy spread. The question is, are you going to have one person, one vote, one time? That's why it was important that Jacob Zuma be held accountable. It took a while for the machinery to work, but I was impressed by it because it showed me the institutions are strong in South Africa. This is no longer an academic thing with me now, because when we talk about our own government, the question about how strong are our institutions comes up. This is the essence of democracy. And what is an institution? My dad used to always say, marriage is an institution, son. Well, there's other institutions, though. As I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking back to that wonderful temple in Chicago known as Tribune Tower. I don't know if you all know, Tribune Tower is something, that was what the Transformers tore down there in the middle of Michigan Avenue. But it was a magnificent scene, wasn't it? I mean, it was incredible. But you can't do a movie in Chicago without having Tribune Tower in it. It's the law. And my entire career, I would come to Tribune Tower. I've never gotten tired of it. Well, we're moving out of Tribune Tower, just like the Washington Post moves out of there, that castle over there where the Woodward and Bernstein worked years ago. All these legendary temples were moving. The business is changing. Technology is changing. But journalism, the basic functions of it, are still there. They don't change. And we had a great publisher many years known as Robert R. McCormick, who said, "A newspaper is an institution developed by modern civilization to present the news of the day to foster commerce and industry, to inform and lead public opinion, and to furnish that check upon government which no constitution has ever been able to provide. Lovely words etched into the marble there at the tower, and they've never meant more to me than they do today, because I see how important it is when you have presidency, both houses of Congress, the courts to a large degree, dominated by one line of political thought. Where do you go for independent thought? Well, you've still got the free press. You've still got those voices out there and those investigative mechanisms that can help to hold the powerful accountable. And that is what humbles us all, and at the same time gives us an immensely important responsibility for the future. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this honor. I am not one who feels like I greatly deserve it, but I accept it on behalf of the great role models I've had in the past and on behalf of the heroes I see developing right here tonight. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the podium Kevin Goldberg.
The Tayshoff Award is made possible due to the generosity of the late Saul Tayshoff, founder and editor of Broadcasting Magazine and a veteran of electronic journalism. It is given to a US-based broadcaster for a body of quality work in video or audio journalism. This year's award winner is Brett Baer of Fox News for a long and successful career in journalism, leading to his current position as chief political anchor and executive editor of Special Report with Brett Baer. The reason behind his success is clear. He's passionate about politics and journalism. For instance, on 9/11, he jumped in his car and drove from Atlanta to DC to cover the attacks. One of his 3 books, 3 Days in January, throws in another passion, apparently golf. He conceived of a book about President Eisenhower's transition of power to John F. Kennedy while staying in the Eisenhower cabin at the famed Augusta National Golf Club. I'm just trying to hit the ball straight. He's thinking up books. You'll learn more about Brett Baer in this short video, after which we'll hear from our 2017 Tayshoff Award winner.
This is Special Report. A lot of people just ask me, why are you doing this?
More than 80 bodies have been pulled out of what's left of the south side of the Pentagon in the mountains here, heading toward the border.
So this is your, what, 12th time?
This is the DMZ.
Please let me know if they answer. It'll be the first time in like 4 years.
A large cheese, please. Would letting one of the big 3 automakers go to bankruptcy be a big mark on your legacy?
I'm looking at all options.
This week?
Well, I'm thinking through.
No date, though, today.
Hey, you're trying to make news. I'm not going to let you make news. So.
But
so
the notion... You guarantee that they're not going to be able to keep their doctor...
Brett, you got to let me finish.
At times, you thought it would be a model for the nation.
You're wrong, Brett.
No, there's tape out there.
No, this is an unusual interview. All right, let's do it again.
Delegates are very fired up to officially kick off this convention. Here's the stage, and the seating here on the floor very important.
You will see all the Romneys sitting in these chairs watching the speech. Maybe not all the Romneys. You couldn't fit all the Romneys.
Here he is pumping mustard into his bottle. Why is Brett Baer hoarding mustard?
I've heard others say that neither you nor your lawyers have been apprised that you are a target of the investigation. Is that true?
Absolutely true.
Your current or former staff?
Absolutely not.
Your staff deleted nearly 32,000 emails.
Let me clarify this.
You don't remember?
Dude, this was like 2 years ago. We're still talking about the most mundane
it is the thing
process.
That everybody is talking about. You were asked yesterday if you've ever spoken to Vladimir Putin.
I have no comment on that. No comment. I was in
one
Russia.
Of the things people like about you is to
but
answer
I don't
any question.
Let's assume I did. Perhaps it was personal.
Okay, so we can say you talked to him. You've mocked Mr. Trump's tan. You've made fun of his spelling. You called him a con artist. So what happened?
There are places where a wall would not be realistic. He has evolved in the way he's looked at things.
And Mexico's not going to pay.
We could get the revenue from Mexico, but not directly from their government.
Fair. Balanced and unafraid. Have you ever seen the movie Caddyshack?
What?
And that's what it takes to get here. Wow, thank you so much. It is such an honor. That video was great. Thank you to my staff. It is so great to be here. Thank you to the National Press Foundation and to the Tayshoff family sitting next to Rob. It's been a pleasure. This is a huge honor. I'm humbled to accept it, not only because of the list of past recipients, but also the award winners up here tonight. Clarence Page, you're a legend and a friend. And who knew he'd mention the Transformers movie? I mean, that's pretty good. I want to thank the Washington Bureau, the folks from Fox News who are here, the producers, the editors, the executives, Bill Salmon, Brian Boughton, my special report staff, Doug Rohrbeck, the executive producer who runs the show, and I'll talk about that Fox family in just a bit. But my family and friends are here as well. I want to thank my co-anchor in life, my beautiful wife, Amy, and my son, Paul, 10-year-old, is here. Transformers, I told you it'd be cool. His 7-year-old brother, Daniel, told us he just didn't think he could make it through the night, so he did not make it. My mom, Pat, my brother, Tim, my sister-in-law, Sam, and my in-laws, Paul and Barbie Hills, from out of town. So this is a family affair, my Fox family and my real family. 1987, the fall of 1987, I found myself in the Rose Garden of the White House. I was a senior in high school and the student council president for Marist School in Atlanta, there with the headmaster to accept an excellence for the school, an award from President Ronald Reagan. The ceremony went well, and then ABC News' Sam Donaldson, who was the Saul Tayshoff Award winner in 1997, Donaldson yelled a question to President Reagan as he was walking back into the Oval Office about the floundering Robert Bork Supreme Court nomination. Senior in high school, Brett Baer, was so livid about that, so upset that he could do that. I went back to Atlanta and I wrote an op-ed in the student paper. And I said in part this, quote, "The press has to respect others around them. They had no right to come into that ceremony and be obnoxious by yelling questions at the president as he walked away. The press gets plenty of time as it is without using someone else's." And it went on, this op-ed, in the Marist blue and gold. Fast forward exactly 20 years from that op-ed, and Fox News Channel's chief White House correspondent, Brett Baer, was yelling a question to President George W. Bush about interrogation policy as he walked away from a different ceremony in that same Rose Garden. I told that story to Sam Donaldson at the New Hampshire primary when I saw him a couple years ago, and he chuckled, and he said, "I had evolved nicely." I started broadcasting in small market TV after college. Many of you know that's not that glamorous. I started in a little station, WJWJ-TV, in Beaufort, South Carolina. I called myself the Low Country Bureau Chief, even though I was really a one-man band, an editor, photographer, reporter, and I covered Hilton Head Island, which had some really big stories. But I made very little money. So I was also a bartender at Applebee's, and I delivered food. So I would go deliver food, and the people would answer the door, and the guy would say, "Hey, wait a second, aren't you the reporter on Channel 6? And I would say, "Yes, and did you have the calzone?" Yep. So that continued. I'd show up and bounce around small market TV, medium market TV, and then 20 plus years ago, I became and was hired the Southeast correspondent for this startup, Fox News Channel. The Atlanta Bureau actually started in my apartment with a fax machine and a cell phone in the shadow of another cable news outlet that seemed to be doing pretty good in Atlanta. I would call people for interviews and I'd say, "I'm from Fox News," and they'd say, "Is that the Simpsons network?" Eventually it stuck. I covered the Southeast and Latin America, and then, as mentioned, 9/11 happened, and I drove up from Atlanta with a producer and started doing live shots outside the still burning Pentagon for Fox affiliates around the country. I never left Washington. I became the Fox News national security correspondent and covered the Pentagon and the intelligence community and traveled to 74 countries with the military and the Secretary of Defense, then Donald Rumsfeld, who arguably could not answer a question better than most people at the time. You remember those Pentagon briefings were daytime TV drama. The Pentagon Press Corps is and was very impressive. I would try to ask intelligence questions on the news of the day, but I'd always ask really some version of the same question, which was, Mr. Secretary, have you found Osama bin Laden? Do you know where Osama bin Laden is? Any new intel on Osama bin Laden? And I'd ask it all the time, and Rumsfeld would not answer with various things. You know, he'd say, it's like chasing a chicken around a barnyard. You're chasing the chicken, and you don't really get the chicken, but you know he's in the barnyard. Some answer like that. So we were flying on Air Force 3, and Secretary Rumsfeld called all of the press up to the front, his office, and after a series of questions, I went to ask mine, and I could hear the other press guys exhaling, like, here it comes. And I paused, and I said, Mr. Secretary, do you think Osama bin Laden knows where you are right now? And everybody laughed, and including Rumsfeld. I've learned over the years how crucial it is to ask the right questions, but most importantly, to listen to the answers and then redirect questions. The late Tim Russert, Tayshoff Award winner in 2004, was someone I looked up to a lot, and he could get that done. Today, let's be honest, like never before, journalism is under attack. Journalists have literally always been under attack in war zones and dangerous places. In fact, just last year, 65 journalists died on the job. 54 were held hostage in 2017. But beyond that, journalism is fundamentally under attack, rhetorically being bombarded every day, and that means we as journalists have to be on our game even more. Push back, push for transparency, dig, ask tough questions, but also listen. Listen first to all sides. When I took over Special Report 9 years ago from my mentor and friend Britt Hume, also a Tayshoff Award winner, 2003, the two things Britt told me were, one, it's not about you. It's about the news, from the correspondents, the producers that are digging it out in Washington and around the world. And two, give all sides a fair shake. Don't run with the herd. Make sure it's fair. You know, there are real reasons for optimism in the face of all of this skepticism and the attacks. Great journalism is happening. At our best, journalists can shed light and really change the world. We also have to stand together and support each other. But also we have to make sure that we are presenting facts for the audience, the viewers, the readers, to make sure that they make their own decisions and make doubly sure we're not trying to make decisions for the audience. When journalists stray into opinion and advocacy, presenting wishes and goals one way or another, it empowers the people who are looking to broadly attack the media every chance they get for some political gain. So we should make it easier for them to do it. Finally, it's a huge team effort to put on a solid news show, and I'm blessed with a fantastic team of hard workers at Special Report and Fox News. So on behalf of my family at home and my family at Fox, I am really honored to accept this award. I love my job, and I look forward to listening around the country and continuing to report in this fascinating time. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're almost at the end of our evening with our last award, but if you've been to this dinner in the past, you know it's a great last award, the Clifford K. and James T. Berryman Award for Editorial Cartoons. I'm sure you're excited as I am to hear from this year's winner, Kevin Gallagher, cartoonist for the Baltimore Sun and The Economist. Trust me, His presentation is going to be amazing. How do I know? Because this isn't his first rodeo. He won this award back in 2002, making him the first two-time winner of the award. And also because I was part of the judging committee that described his work as capturing the complexity of our age, layered both visually and emotionally with striking artwork that jumps off the page with nuanced body language, vivid details, and intense expressions. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our 2017 Berryman Award winner, who will give you a short presentation of his work, Kevin Gallagher.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. My gosh, what an elite and esteemed group of individuals that I get to share the stage and this podium. I am very humbled. So it's traditional at these kind of events for somebody to come up here and give a slew of thank yous to all the people that, helped you get to this position. But as a cartoonist, I thought I'd try something a little different. So Dan, I'm going to ask you to put up my presentation, if you don't mind, on the screen. I thought it would be appropriate to thank the politicians whose faces have inspired me over the years and helped me get here. So first I thought we'd start with one of the first politicians I remember drawing. This is Abraham Lincoln, Gettysburg Address. And this cartoon, by the way, is a very important cartoon because this cartoon inspired a feature-length motion picture starring Daniel Day-Lewis. This cartoon. But American presidents have long supplied cartoonists with facial fodder. We have Republicans like Ronald Reagan, here with his sidekick, Mikhail Gorbachev, and also George W. Bush. And not to be outdone, of course, we also have Democrats, both old and new. And of course, it's not just presidents that help us out, these cartoonists, vice presidents too. We have someone like Joe Biden. And then, of course, this one, I love this one, Dick Cheney. So, we also had, I have to be special thanks to the supporting staff from the 2016 election who kind of prepped us, got us all ready, the cartoonists and satirists, for the year of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump has been really like a walking, talking cartoon. And it's been a target-rich environment pretty much in this year, but there's been 4 big events that have stood out as special sources for satiric inspiration. So the first one is Twitter. So we have this woman, you guys probably know about her. She's got the toughest job in Washington, okay? She's got to do damage control, and she has to catch wayward tweets and before they can possibly cause any damage. And we know, of course, how difficult and how fiery these tweets can be. And she can work really hard, and with some luck, she may end up nailing it, and she can go, whew, triumph, except this is what the reality is. So the second big item of the year was Donald Trump's treatment of enemies, both foreign and domestic. So we have a cartoon here. You can see the Trump supporter, and he's saying, finally, a sane and sensible president willing to take on Kim Jong-un. And Uncle Sam is saying, that's Mitch McConnell. And then speaking of North Korea, we have these two guys, and this cartoon's got a very simple caption that says, nuclear buttons we'd all prefer. So anyways, the big story of the year, though, is this. This is Russia. Russia and Putin, big story of the year. Now, you guys remember this first meeting between these two. We actually now have a transcript of this conversation. And it goes like this. So there's Putin. He's saying, hello, Donald. I tapped your last election, attacking your most defining national institution. And I intend to do it again, only this time with more precision. And Donald Trump said, you had me at hello. So I know we have a lot of journalists in the room, but you guys might have missed this story. There was a press conference just late this afternoon with Vladimir Putin, and he was asked this question: President Putin, how do you respond to the recent turmoil in the White House? And he thought for a second, and then he thought some more. Oh God, he was really chewing it around in his head, and the more he thought about it, the more he began to think, well, but he pulled himself together. He got himself up straight, and he gave his response, no comment. So anyways, so the cartoons and the politicians have been great, but I actually have, on a more serious side, I do have three big thank yous to give out. So the first is for my family. My wife, Sue, my son, Dan, my daughter, Amy, who are here. Great support, great love. It's so much fun to have you around, and I really love you guys. Thanks ever so much. Then the Baltimore Sun. Yes, applause my family. Give it up for my family. Good. Thank you. So then there's the Baltimore Sun. Now, specifically, my editorial page editor, Andy Green, and editor and publisher, Triff Alatsis, who are here too, because of their support to me, but also their support of cartooning. Now, the Baltimore Sun understands the value that a cartoon can bring to a media organization. And if any of you organizations out there don't have a cartoonist, I think you should reconsider. Now, primarily because cartoons are superstars of social media, a place where we all want to be. But also because cartoons have that special brand of humor and satire that are badly needed in these troubling and tumultuous times. Now, finally, I have a deep sense of gratitude that I work in a country where cartoons and satire are embraced and celebrated. Now, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the landmark Supreme Court decision of Jerry Falwell versus Hustler magazine, which came back in favor of satire. And in the writing and opinion, Chief Justice Rehnquist talked about how cartoons and satire are essential parts of a mature democracy. So, as we have politicians who insist on acting immature in this mature democracy, I'd like to say today that I believe that cartooning and satire have got a very bright future here in America. So I want to thank the National Press Foundation, and I want to thank you guys for your time. Great stuff. Thank you.
Guess I'm using the box this time. Tonight represents the end of my 2 years as NPF chairman. As a graduate of a university named after a president, no, not that university, the one that was sued, but the good one, named after a president who actually championed the First Amendment, James Madison, I've never needed a reminder that journalism matters. But I cannot tell you how proud I am to have had this opportunity to lead an organization putting that into practice every day. So now, the new chair of the National Press Foundation Board of Directors, Kathy Guest.
Thank you, Kevin, for your outstanding service at the helm of NPF for the last 2 years. I'm honored to step into your shoes at a time when the importance of a free and responsible press could not be clearer. The support that all of you give us with your presence here tonight is invaluable, and I want to thank you all for coming. So now, as my first official act as chairman of NPF, let me invite you all to celebrate at the after party hosted by Politico in the Anthem restaurant next to the lobby bar. Thank you, and good night.